my name is Mark Lasacco. I'm a developer and Scrum Master on the team that's primarily responsible for the integration between NetOps and DX Operation Intelligence. And the purpose of this talk is to update you on changes between the last support talk we gave, which was OI Connector 2.1.2, and update you on anything that's changed between then and now. So a little bit about what the OI connector is. I presume that you kind of already know this, but the primary two products that integrate through the NetOps OI connector is performance management and NFA, network flow analytics. See the different types of data that we send from each product, but we do use NetOps Portal as a required component for the integration. That's Portal brings together these data sources, and the connector interacts with NetOps Portal to get a consolidated inventory that it sends to OI. I updated the compatibility guide slide, and what you'll notice is that there's really two recommended versions. If you're using anything less than NetOps 20.2.4, including the 3.x stream, you're going to be on OI Connector 1.5, which was the kind of the last of its breed, which was before we moved over to using Kafka for our metric ingestion. And so I'll show an architecture slide to kind of illustrate what that means. But essentially, if you're on anything older than 20.2.4, you want to be on OI Connector 1.5. Anything 20.2.4 or higher, the recommendation is that you move to OI Connector 2.1.4. Rather than kind of drop the 2.1.1 and 2.1.2, I just added 2.1.3 and 2.1.4 to the what's new slide. And so if we look at it, there was a 2.1.3 release. In that release, we made some changes to encrypt any sensitive data in our configuration files. So part of what's stored in the configuration files are the NetOps portal credentials that the connector uses to connect to NetOps portal over REST. It also has the OI tenant cohort ID, which is the tenant ID in OI that you're mapping the data to and sending the data to, as well as the OI tenant token, which is very sensitive. If someone has that token, they have access through the gate. If they have access to that token and the gateway, they can access any data that's been sent to OI. So under the 2.1.3 connector version, that data is now encrypted in our configuration files. As part of the installer does it for you, so it's largely transparent to the end user when you're installing the connector. The keys and credentials that you provide are encrypted by the installer and stored encrypted in the file. So where it really comes into play is later when if you would ever need to modify or update those things. There are now steps outlined in the documentation that walk you through how to manually encrypt the information that you need to put in those files. So for example, if you changed your NetOps password, your NetOps portal password, that password is changed, the connector would no longer be able to connect to NetOps portal, using the old password. You would have to either reinstall the product or manually encrypt with the utility the new credentials and provide that in the file. So I'll show a slide later on that and point you to the documentation where it documents how to do that. Also in 2.1.3, the connector contributes health status information to DX operational intelligence. What that means is the connector reports things like how many metrics it sent in the last 5 minutes, how many inventory items it's sending on each push, that sort of thing. And there's a dashboard within DX operational intelligence that shows connector health status. I unfortunately don't have a good system to show that today, but that is something that I think they are iterating on as well, because I believe they haven't totally taken advantage of all of the data that we're sending yet. but the connector is sending that stuff to open up the possibility for those sorts of dashboards within OI. 213 also introduced Syslog integration with NetOps Portal. This is a feature they call, it's part of this initiative called Insights. And what that does is it attempts to bring insights from OI down into NetOps Portal. And this particular integration with Syslog, it lets you show Syslog events in the context of a device or events, Syslog events that occurred around the same time as an alarm, a NetOps alarm. But it does require DX OI log analytics, so it's like an add-on. I don't believe every OI customer would have access to this. There is a significant amount of storage required to store Syslog data in Elastic on the OI platform, and so this is kind of a subscription add-on type of thing, which it was kind of soft released. I think the big push though is coming in the next quarter as we finish up the current PI. There's a lot more coming with regard to Syslog event surfacing within NetOps Portal, and I think the big marketing push for that is going to be coming soon. We also implemented the ability to download a pre-configured connector package from DX Operational Intelligence, the SaaS platform only. So if the customer is using OI SaaS, there is a component download page in OI that would allow you to download the various connectors, the Spectrum connector, the Spectrum Data Publisher, I mean, and the NetOps OI connector. And the nice thing about that download, it still installs, that you download it and install it the same way you would if you got it off the support site. You still run the installer, but it includes, it already includes some information about the tenant and the token, etc. So it's easier for the customer to install. It's kind of pre-configured with their tenant information, and the installer just kind of seamlessly uses that and skips over the prompts that would normally come up to ask them for that information. There's still a lot of prompts about NetOps credentials and that sort of thing, but anything related to the OI connection gets pre-configured when you download it from SaaS. Okay. And then moving ahead and looking ahead to the 214 release, there's not a lot of customer facing, there's really no customer facing enhancements here yet. The key thing is obviously Log4j vulnerability is big on everybody, on everyone in the world's mind right now, and the 214 connector will address that by moving to the very latest Apache Log4j. And the connector also includes some important defect fixes, and I'll show a slide in a second here with that. We were seeing issues where the OI connector would reset the seed group unnecessarily. So if the customer had modified the default seed group, so the default OI seed group out of the box is just all devices, and we've seen circumstances where the customer has modified that seed group to restrict down the inventory to say some subset of all devices, and the connector didn't recognize that change and reforce the default back on it, and so the customer was getting a lot more devices than they expected. So there's that defects. Yeah, and this other one is nothing that a customer would see, but we were seeing some errors in the data aggregator log related to some activity the connector was doing over REST. So yeah, so I included a couple slides to show some of this new onboarding that we have in NetOps Portal. There's a new menu item as of 21.2.5 under the configuration settings menu in NetOps Portal. There's an OI connector status menu item now. And if the customer has already got the connector configured, they'll be able to see the status of the connector right there. It also, if it's not configured, it also kind of walks them through how to download a pre-configured OI package from their DXOI account. You still install it the same way. And in fact, I guess there's some concerns like right now, the fastest way to get 21.2. Or sorry, the 2.1.4 release of the connector will be through the customer support download page, because there is this cadence of OI SaaS releases. And so if OI SaaS goes out before we ship the connector, and there's this lag between when we can get the connector redeployed to SaaS. So for the most up-to-date connectors, I would always go to the support download site. I mentioned that if a customer has this Syslog integration, they can see Syslog events in the context of their devices. So I've got a screenshot here, and you can see there's a new context page called log events. And when they click it, if they've got this integration and we go out and we actively harvest log data, syslog data from Elastic, from OI Elastic platform in the time range that's specified. So, for example, like the last hour, and so we'll be able to show the actual syslog events, and this graph just kind of shows a timeline that shows the number of events we received during each little block here. And it's nice because you can click the bar and it will jump to the spot in the event list, etc., that the bar represents, and that sort of thing. So we have a similar integration on the alarm console in NetOps portal. So if you go to alarm console and you click on a specific alarm, down at the bottom you can select log events, and this will show the syslog events that occurred on the device within a window around when the actual alarm happened. I think it's like a 10-minute range around the alarm. And so this could let you see perhaps any syslog information related that might be related to the alarm in question. Looking at the 21.2.4 NetOps release and the upcoming connector release, I mentioned there were some defects fixed. Obviously, Log4j vulnerability. There is a defect that we caught in the 21.2.6 release process, but it actually affects 21.2.5 as well. The current released connector is having issues unmarshalling the results of the seed group query from NetOps portal, and it's really a breaking bug with the 21.2.5 and 21.2.6. If you have somebody on 21.2.5 NetOps, they're definitely going to need the 2.1.4 connector. It's a breaking issue. Unfortunately, not caught during the 21.2.5 release time frame. So, other issue found is that if a customer is using a non kind of default Java location, the connector installer doesn't set up the Kafka service with the correct Java. So we resolved that. And we also resolved an issue where now that the security credentials are encrypted, the connector was failing to unregister the connector service from NetOps portal when you uninstall the connector. So we fixed that as well. I included a slide here. Now, if somebody wanted to mitigate Log4j in the current version of the connector that they have, I included some instructions on how to do that manually. It involves changing some configuration files in the connector manually and then restarting the connector in a prior version of the connector. For those that aren't aware, the Kafka is in the mix of our connector architecture. It's a message bus that we use to get metrics from the data aggregator component of NetOps performance management. and the connector harvests those metrics off that data bus and submits them over to OI. And so part of the installation of the connector is to either use the bundled in Kafka installation, or they can point it to their own cluster if the customer already has a Kafka cluster in-house that they would like to use instead. They have that option. So if you needed to configure multiple tenants, I mentioned here in the slide that the cohort ID and tenant tokens are now encrypted, and we have a link to the documentation that talks about how to configure those mappings, and those instructions have been updated to document how to get a new and to encrypt the information that you need to put in these files. So there's a new utility that we ship with the connector in the bin folder called encryptor.sh, just a shell script, and you give it the piece of data that you're encrypting and it spits out the encrypted version of that. So you use that utility to now and going forward, you use that utility to modify or update any credentials.